5 things you probably didn't know about deaf people. Take the deaf challenge. Sports. I'm not deaf, but I'm telling you from family experience. My parents are deaf, and I have 3 siblings who are deaf. One of them plays basketball. Wait, and deaf people play sports. Who says that? I don't think I've ever approached anyone who says, whoa, deaf people can play sports? They can use bodily functions? No. Get out of here. Come on, what is this? Second question. Big D versus little d. Whoa! Got a little sensual here. A little sexual here? Huh? I've never heard of that. No one's ever talked about that. Hey, baby! Am I a big D or a little d? You think they're missing something there? Maybe like a micro D? Come on, we don't want to miss out those little guys. Alright, what the heck is big D versus little d? This I gotta know. There's a big difference between being deaf and being deaf. What? No, there isn't. It's exactly the same. Look at this. It says, generally the small d do not associate with other members of the deaf community. They may strive to identify themselves with hearing people, regarding their hearing loss solely in medical terms. Some are progressively losing their hearing and not that integrated into the deaf culture. In contrast, big D, the big D, the massive D, the soft 9D, because deaf people identify themselves as culturally deaf and have a strong deaf identity. Okay, look, I don't have any deaf friends. I wear a hearing aid, I speak normally, I barely use ASL. And I still consider myself a big D because I was born profoundly deaf and I take it on with pride. Do you know why? Because I don't have to listen to anyone else's BS. They're quite often proud to be deaf. It's common that big D deaf attended schools and programs for the deaf. The small D deaf tend to have mainstream, and I have attended a school for the deaf. But I'm sorry, why are we being small D? I feel like the big D because we're being progressive. We're actually trying to fight something that's already challenging in life. I think there should be like massive D for the people who wear hearing aids and the micro D for the people who are like, fuck you, I'm not wearing science. Fuck you, science. Blows my mind. Good luck with your big D, bro. Alright. ASL optional. Not all deaf people use ASL. That is 100% true. So when a deaf person says they are deaf, don't assume they know sign language, and do not say you speak well for a deaf person, or you don't look deaf. It's really offensive. I honestly, I've never taken offense by that. I actually found it hilarious because they're actually looking for that magical unicorn of a guy who looks magically deaf. Like, what does a deaf person look like to you? I just want you to picture that in your head right now. Tell me what you think a deaf person looks in your mind. Do you imagine it's just a guy with no ears chopped off? And just, I don't know, bald with no ears. So it's just like a slick head. Like an unfinished caricature model in a video game or something. Is that what you're imagining? I don't get it. 4. Braille? What? How do we get from deaf to blind? Many people assume that when a person is deaf, they automatically mute or blind. Okay. Robert Downey Jr. said it.
You went full retard, man. Never go full retard.
This in case for deaf people, when people ask me if I know Braille, I don't go full Helen Keller here, okay? I'm not blind, deaf, and mute, and water hungry. Hey, what are you doing? Alright, what's next? Eye contact. Making eye contact is extremely important for hearing impaired. Deaf people find not making eye contact rude. First of all, I find eye contact not a deaf thing. It's an everyday, general politeness thing to do. If you're talking to someone, you automatically should be making eye contact with them. What kind of idiot just walks off and still have a conversation? It makes no sense. Eye contact should be just like the bare minimum for everyone. Makes no sense. Well, that's the 5 things you didn't know about deaf people. I found another website that could tell you like 10 questions. So here's one. 7 questions you've always wanted to ask a deaf person. Alright, let's see where they are. And down here it says Happy National Deaf Awareness Month. Shit, I didn't know we had a Deaf Awareness Month. Apparently it was on September. Oh shit, that's next month, baby! You better appreciate me. What is the best way to communicate with a person who is deaf if I don't know sign language? Well, first of all, if you're approaching someone who you think is deaf, I don't know, because their ears are lopped off, just approach and talk normally. We'll let you know if we use ASL or we talk back normally. Look at me, I'm talking to you just fine. I have plenty of conversation when I have no issues. The problem is if you're looking at somebody who's fully deaf, and we're talking about like, want to be a pureblood kind of type of thing. Okay, so what you want to do? Alright, so this is what you do. This is how you approach a deaf person. Okay? You want to get down on your haunches. You want to get real low so you got a nice center mass. And I want you to have like this hand. And I just want to scream. Just a real deep guttural call. That's the best way to approach a deaf person. Let's say assume they only know ASL. You could just whip out your phone and start texting. Everyone has a cell phone these days. There's no excuse for having that much difficulty to communicate with a deaf person. Just almost none. How do deaf people listen to music? This question I get a lot. It's like, we don't. We just don't. I mean, most people who want to listen to music, and I have all props for them, enjoy what you want to enjoy. For my experience, I have a playlist that has like 2 songs on them, and I bet they're both crap. It took me a long time to realize that Katy Perry is actually pronounced Katy Perry. Or it wasn't Cleon Dion, it's actually Celine Dion. It makes sense, it's more of a poppy name. As long as it has a good bass or something we can hook on to, like the yeah part, we can listen to music and still rock out hard as anyone else. Unless you can't do sports, then you're screwed. What do you wish that other people could understand about your experience? I think probably the number one thing I tell everyone, whether they've never met a deaf person or they met a million deaf people, it's always the same response. Deaf people are looking for clarity. They're not looking for volume. They're not looking for pacing. They're looking for clarity. Clarity involves enunciating, speaking at a normal volume, and speaking at a normal pace. That's the 3 trifecta here. All we're looking for. So what you shouldn't do is speak extremely fast, speak extremely slow, talk really loud, or barely make a whisper. I mean, can you imagine? It could be like, hey, how are you? No, don't do that. What's the best thing about being deaf? The best thing about being deaf? I can turn off my hearing aid at any time I want and I get complete silence. Think about it. That does a lot for me. Like, I don't have to listen to a shitty band in a restaurant playing awful music. I can turn off my hearing aid. I could turn off my hearing aid on an airplane. I don't have to hear babies crying or a Karen screaming in the background saying racist things. I can turn off my hearing aid when I go to bed at night, and I don't have to worry about the house creaking or my neighbors banging. I'm set. I always get a good, solid night, 8 hours of sleep. Can all deaf people read lips? Yes. I mean, we're kind of forced to. I gotta say this. Reading lips is a supplement. It's not the primary focus. Anyone can learn to read lips. Anyone can, if they took the time and effort. But for deaf people, we're kind of forced in that corner, so we just naturally learn it. What do music and voices sound like with the cochlear implant? I have a cochlear implant. That's actually a good question. I actually had a cochlear implant, and I tried it on for a while. Everyone sounded like Donald Duck. That's just the weirdest thing, because it's a different type of transmission. The one I'm wearing right now, it's just a regular hearing aid, which amplifies it. It's not a translator, it's not a converter, it's not anything like that. It's still being, it amplifies my hearing aid. The cochlear implant is a little bit more digital to me, and it comes off because it's going through a magnet on the side of my head. So everyone just sounds like Donald Duck. Didn't work out that great for me. Honestly, I answered enough questions from here for now on. I'm sure there's more out there. I'll eventually get to them. But if you have any questions you always want to ask about a deaf person, feel free to put them in the comments. I'll try my best to answer them. And there's no stupid questions except for the stupid questions. So feel free to put a comment in the section below.